Hey, it's Brett. This is Brett and some books. We are continuing Prince Caspian, the second story in the Chronicles of Narnia. We're on chapter 12, entitled Sorcery and Sudden Vengeance. Meanwhile, Trumpkin and the two boys arrived at the dark little stone archway which led into the inside of the mound, and two sentinel badgers, the white patches on their cheeks were all Edmund could see of them, leaped up with bared teeth and asked them in snarling voices, "Who goes there?" "Trumpkin," said the dwarf. "Bring the High King of Narnia out far past." The badgers nosed at the boys' hands. "At last," they said. "At last." "Give us a little light, friends." "Give us a little light, friends," said Trumpkin. The badgers found a torch just inside the arch, and Peter lit it and handed it to Trumpkin. "The DLF had better lead," he said. "I don't know our way about the place." Trumpkin took the torch and went ahead into the dark tunnel. It was cold, black, musty place, with the occasional bat fluttering in the torchlight, and plenty of cobwebs. The boys, who had been mostly in the open air since that morning at the railway station, felt as if they were going into a trap or a prison. "I say, Peter," whispered Edmund, "look at those carvings on the walls. Don't they look old? And yet we're older than that. When we were last here, they hadn't been made." "Yes," said Peter, "that makes one think." The dwarf went on ahead, and then turned to the right, and then to the left, and then down some steps, and then to the left again. Then at last they saw a light ahead, a light from under a door. And now for the first time they heard voices, for they had come to the door of the central chamber. The voices inside were angry ones. Someone was talking so loudly that the approach of the boys and the dwarf had not been heard. "Don't like the sound of that," whispered Trumpkin to Peter. "Let's listen for a moment." And then all three stood perfectly still outside the door. "You know well enough," said a voice. "That's the king," said Trumpkin. "Why, the horn was not blown at sunrise that morning. Have you forgotten that Miraz fell upon us almost before Trumpkin had gone, and we were fighting for our lives in the space of 3 hours and more? I blew it when I first had a breathing space." Oh, shit. "I'm not likely to forget. When my dwarves bore the brunt of the attack, and one of 5 of them. That's Nickabrick." "For shame, dwarf," came a thick voice. "Truffle hunters," said Trumpkin. "We all did as much as the dwarves, and none more than the king." "Tell that tale your own way, for all I care," answered Nickabrick. "But whether it was just the horn was blown too late, or whether there was no magic in it, no help has come. You great clerk, you master magician, you know all. Are you still asking us to hang our hopes on Aslan and King Peter and the rest of it?" I must confess, I cannot deny it, that I am deeply disappointed in the results of the operation," came the answer. That'll be Dr. Cornelius," said Trumpkin. "To speak plainly," said Nickabrick, "your wallet's empty, your eggs addled, your fish uncut, your promises broken. Stand aside then and let others work, and that is why—" "The help will come," said Truffle Hunter. "I stand by Aslan. Have patience, like us beasts. The help will come. may it even be now at the door." "Pah!" said Nickabrick. "You badgers would have us all wait till the night sky falls and we can all catch larks. I tell you we can't wait. Food is running short. We lose more than we can afford every encounter. Our followers are slipping away." "And why?" said Truffle Hunter. "I'll tell you why. Because it is noised among them that we have called the kings of old, and kings of the old have not answered. The last words Trumpkin spoke before he went, and went most likely to his death, were, 'If you must blow the horn, do not let the army know why you blow it or what you hope from it.' But that same evening everyone seemed to know." "You'd better have showed your great snout in a hornet's nest, Badger, than suggest that I am the blab," said Nickabrick. "Take it back, or—" "Oh, shut up! Stop it, both of you," said King Caspian. "I want to know what it is that Nickabrick keeps on hinting we should do. Before that, I want to know who those two strangers are whom he has brought into our council, and who stand there with their ears open and their mouths shut." "They are friends of mine," said Nickabrick. "And what better right have you yourself to be here than you are a friend of Trumpkin's and the Badger? And what right does that old dotard and the black gown to be here as he is your friend? Why am I the only one who can't be bringing his friends?" "His Majesty the King is whom you have sworn allegiance," said Truffle Hunter sternly. Court manners," sneered Nickabrick. "But in this hole we may talk plainly, you know, and he knows that this Telmarine boy will be king of nowhere and nobody in a week unless we can help him out of the trap in which he sits." "Perhaps," said Cornelius, "your new friends would like to speak for themselves. You there, who and what are you?" "Worshipful, Master Doctor," came a thin, whining voice, "so please you, I'm only a poor old woman. I am very obliged to his worshipful dwarfship for his friendship, I'm sure. His Majesty, bless his handsome face, has no need to be afraid of an old woman that's nearly doubled up with the rheumatics and hasn't had 2 sticks to put under her kettle. I have some poor little skill, not like yours, Mr. Doctor, of course, in small spells and cantrips that I'd be glad to use against our enemies if it was agreeable to all concerned, for I hate 'em. Oh, yes, no one hates better than me." "That's almost interesting and satisfactory," said Dr. Cornelius. "I think I now know what you are. Madam, perhaps your other friend, Nickabrick, will give you some account of himself." A dull grey voice, at which Peter's flesh crept, replied, "I'm hunger, I'm thirst. Where I bite, I hold till I die. And even after death, they must cut my mouthful from my enemy's body and bury it with me. I can fast 100 years and not die. I can lie 100 nights on the ice and not freeze. I can drink a river of blood and not burst. Show me your enemies." "And it is in the presence of these two that you wish to disclose your plan," said Caspian. "Yes," said Nickabrick, "and by their help I can mean to execute it." There was a minute or two during which Trumpkin and the boys could hear Caspian and his friends speaking in low voices, but could not make out what they were saying. Then Caspian spoke aloud. "Well, Nickabrick," he said, "we will hear your plan." There was a long pause, so that the boys began to wonder if Nickabrick was ever going to begin. When he did, it was in a lower voice, as if he himself did not much like what he was saying. "All said and done," he muttered, None of us knows the truth about the ancient days in Narnia. Trumpkin believed none of the stories. I was ready to put them to the trial, but we tried first to horn and it has failed. And if there ever was a High King Peter and a Queen Susan and a King Edmund and a Queen Lucy, then either they have not heard us, or they cannot come, or they are our enemies. Oh, they are on their way, said Truffle Hunter. You can keep saying that till Miraz has fed us all to his dogs. As I was saying, we have tried one link in the chain of old legends, and it has done us no good. Well, but when your sword breaks, you draw your dagger. The stories tell of other powers beside the ancient kings and queens. How if we could call them up? If you mean Aslan, said Truffle Hunter, it's all one calling on him and the kings. They were his servants. If it will not send them, but I make no doubt he will, is he more likely to come himself? No, you're right there, said Knickerbrick. Aslan and the kings go together. Either Aslan is dead, or he is not on our side, or something stronger than himself keeps him back. And if he did come, how did we know that he would be our friend? He was not always a good friend to the dwarfs, and all that's told. Not even to all beasts. Ask the wolves. And anyway, he was in Narnia only once that I ever heard of, and he didn't stay long. You may drop Aslan out of the reckoning. I was thinking of someone else. There was no answer, and for a few minutes it was so still that Edmund could hear the wheezy and shuffling breath of the badger. Who do you mean? Said Caspian at last. I mean a power so much greater than Aslan that it held Narnia spellbound for years and years, if the stories are true. The White Witch! Cried three voices all at once, and from the noise Peter guessed that all three people had leapt to their feet. Yes, said Knickerbrick, very slowly and distinctly. I mean witch. Sit down again. Don't all take fright at a name such as if you were children. We want power, and we want a power that will be on our side. As for power, do not the stories say that the witch defeated Aslan and bound him and killed him on that very stone which is over there, just beyond the light? But they also say that he came back to life again, said the badger sharply. Yes, they say, answered Knickerbrick, but you'll notice that we hear precious little about anything he did afterwards. He just fades out of the story. How do you explain that? If he really came to life, isn't it much more likely that he didn't? And the stories say nothing about him because there was nothing more to say. He established the kings and the queens, said Caspian. A king who has just won a great battle can usually establish himself without the help of a performing lion, said Knickerbrick. There was a fierce growl, probably from Truffle Hunter. And anyway, Knickerbrick continued, what came of the kings in their reign? They faded too. But it's very different with the witch. They say she ruled for 100 years, 100 years of winter. There's no power, if you like. There's something practical. But heaven on earth, said the king. Haven't we always been told that she was the worst enemy of all? Wasn't she a tyrant 10 times worse than Miraz? Perhaps, said Knickerbrick in a cold voice. Perhaps she was for you humans, if there were any of you in those days. Perhaps she was for some of the beasts. She stamped out the beavers, I dare say. But at least there were none of them to come in Narnia now. But she got on all right with us dwarfs. I'm a dwarf, and I stand by my own people. We're not afraid of the witch. But you've joined with us, said Truffle Hunter. Yeah, and a lot of good it's done my people so far, snapped Nickabrick. Who is sent on all dangerous roads? The dwarves. Who gives short when the rations fill? The dwarves. Who... Lies, all lies, cried the Badger. And so, said Nickabrick, whose voice now rose to a scream, if you can't help me, people, I'm going to find someone who can. Is this open treason, dwarf? Asked the king. Put that sword back in your sheath, Caspian, said Nickabrick. Murder at council, eh? Is that your game? Don't be a fool enough to try it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? There's 3 on my side and 3 on yours. Come on, then, snarled Truffle Hunter, and he was immediately interrupted. Stop, 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 said Dr. Cornelius. You go on too fast. The witch is dead. All the stories agree on that. What does Nickabrick mean by calling on the witch? The grey and terrible voice, which had spoken only once before, said, Oh, is she? And the shrill, whining voice began, Oh, bless his heart. His dear little majesty needn't mind what about the white lady. That's what we call her, being dead. The worshipful master doctor is only making game of a poor old woman like me when he says that. Sweet master doctor, learned master doctor, whoever heard of a witch that really died? You can always get them back. Call her up, said the grey voice. We are all ready. Draw the circle. Prepare the blue fire. Above the steadily increasing growl of the Badger and Cornelius's sharp What? Rose the voice of King Caspian like thunder. So that is your plan, Nickabrick. Black sorcery and the calling up of an accursed ghost, and I see who your companions are. A hag and a werewolf. The next moment or so was very confused. There was an animal roaring, a clash of steel. The boys and Trumpkin rushed in. Peter had a glimpse of a horrible, grey, gaunt creature, half man and half wolf, in the very act of leaping upon a boy about his own age. And Edmund saw a badger and a dwarf rolling on the floor in a sort of cat fight. Trumpkin found himself face to face with the hag. Her nose and chin stuck out like a pair of nutcrackers. Her dirty grey hair was flying about her face, and she had just got Dr. Cornelius by the throat. At one slash of Trumpkin's sword, her head rolled on the floor. Then the light was knocked over, and it was all swords, teeth, claws, fists, and boots for about 60 seconds. Then silence. Are you all right, Ed? I think so, panted Edmund. I've got that brute Nickabrick, but he's still alive. Weights and water bottles, came an angry voice. It's me you're sitting on. Get off. You're like a young elephant. Sorry, DLF, said Edmund. Is that better? Oh, no, bellowed Trumpkin. You're putting your boot in my mouth. Go away. Is King Caspian anywhere? Asked Peter. I'm here, said a rather faint voice. Something bit me. And they all heard the noise, someone striking a match. It was Edmund. The little flame showed his face, looked pale and dirty. He blundered about for a bit, found the candle. They were no longer using the lamp, for they had run out of oil, set it on the table and lit it. When the flame rose clear, several people scrambled to their feet. 6 faces blinked at one another in the candlelight. We don't seem to have any enemies left, said Peter. There's the hag, dead. He turned his eyes quickly away from her. And Nickabrick, dead too. And I suppose this thing's a werewolf? It's long since I've seen one, wolf's head and man's body. That means he was just turning from man into wolf the moment he was killed. And you, I suppose, are King Caspian? Yes, said the other boy, but I've no idea who you are. It's the High King, King Peter. No, it's the High King, King Peter, said Trumpkin. Your Majesty is very welcome, said Caspian. And so is your Majesty, said Peter. I haven't come to take your place, you know, but to put you into it. Your Majesty, said another voice at Peter's elbow. He turned and found himself face to face with the badger. Peter leaned forward, put his arms round the beast, and kissed the furry head. It wasn't a girlish thing for him to do, because he was the High King. Best of badgers, he said, you never doubted us all through. No credit to me, Your Majesty, said Truffle Hunter. I'm a beast and we don't change. I'm a badger, and what's more, and we hold on. I'm sorry for Nickabrick, said Caspian. Thought he hated me from the first moment he saw me. He had gone sour inside from long suffering and hating. If we'd won quickly, he might have become a good dwarf in the days of peace. I don't know which of us killed him. I'm glad of that. You're bleeding, said Peter. Yes, I'm bitten, said Caspian. It was that wolf thing. Cleaning and bandaging the wound took a little time, and when it was done, Trumpkin said, Now, before everything else, we want some breakfast. But not here. No, said Caspian with a shudder, and we must send someone to take away the bodies. Let the vermin be flung into a pit, said Peter, but the dwarf we will give to his people to be buried in their own fashion. They breakfasted at last in another of the dark cellars of Aslan's howl. It was not such a breakfast as they would have chosen, for Caspian and Cornelius were thinking of venison pasties, and Peter and Edmund of buttered eggs and hot coffee. But what everyone got was a little bit of cold bear meat out of the boys' pockets, a lump of hard cheese, an onion, and a mug of water. But from the way they fell to, anyone would have supposed it was delicious. That's the end of chapter 12.